Thank you for joining the class once again. So I hope you can see my screen. Today, we'll be looking at web application vulnerabilities. So in general, when you own a company or when you work for a company, they are most likely to have some sort of a website or web application exposed to internet, right? There may be multiple websites. So if you're working for a company as a developer, when you develop code for a website, you must be able to understand what are the weaknesses within web applications and how do I develop secure code. So in OWASP, Open Web Application Security Protocol, so they are a non-profit organization. They kind of assess what are the top web application vulnerabilities. Okay. They release OWASP top 10 every few years. And this kind of gives us an idea of what kind of weaknesses are mostly exploited by hackers. Okay. So if you can see my screen, the 2021 OWASP top 10 was published a few months ago, and they kind of compare it with what was top 10 a few years back. So, for example, you can see broken access control, cryptographic failures, injection, insecure design, security misconfiguration. So each one has, what it is and, how attackers kind of misuse all these controls. We will see examples of it, okay? So there is what's called an OWASP juice shop, okay? Let me quickly look it up. Okay. Okay, so this one is an intentionally vulnerable web application where you can practice your hacking skills, where as a developer, you can also look at what kind of weaknesses exist in websites. So this is typical, right? This is like in a e-commerce website. You have a juice shop over here, and you can pretty much order fruit juices, and you have reviews, right? And you can register for an account. So it says, okay, test, or I don't think I have a registered account, but you can, register for your account. You can purchase, you have a basket, you have a payment method, it's all simulated. So it looks like a pretty decent website, right? So you can also check this out. I will put it in the chat. So this is published by OWASP Foundation. And this kind of is the first step where you go to actually practice your cybersecurity skills on web application hacking and development. So I have my own instance of the juice shop. I have it running on one of my virtual machines. I have it in my laptop. Let's fire it up. So I'm using what's called Docker. You might hear these terms when you go into your jobs. So Docker is a famous or prevalent software containerization product. Okay. So what do you mean by containers? So containers are like abstracts of your developed code where you can package all your code into an image. Now, typically, when when you're operating on your laptop, right, when you're working on things with your Windows operating system, when you want to develop some code, or you have to, you have to develop something where you got to install application. Like you're developing a Python code, you have to install Python. You have to install all the packages that you need for your code. You have to install all the dependencies, all the libraries. You have to make sure even if you do the same thing on another system, you must also have the same kind of packages installed on those systems, right? So that's a challenge even for organizations. Typically, you have websites running on hundreds of web servers. Now, in order to make sure each web server has the same packages installed, the same type of configurations, the same type of dependencies, is kind of a challenge. And that's where containers come in. So containers will package everything that you need in a single package, like single image. And you can deploy the image quickly across several different types of web server. It doesn't necessarily have to be that everything should look the same as from an operating system level. If you have like a container, you can deploy the containers even though the operating systems are slightly different. And you can run the same type of code everywhere. All the websites will look the same across different web servers. So that's where you have, you can look up more on what Docker is. You can explore what containers are. So this is where organizations are moving these days towards development of code. So there is what Kubernetes. Kubernetes is an orchestration platform for Docker, develop code. So all these things, if you kind of can familiarize yourself, before going out of college, that'd be great, because the development community usually kind of knows these terms and talks in these terms. So going back to what we have. So let me see if I have fired up. Okay. So I've been able to pull down a Docker image of the juice shop. Okay. There are instructions in the web, you can look into it. So I am running it on a typical Linux desktop on port 3000. So this is the command for it. It's currently running on my Linux desktop. So I'm going into my Kali Linux operating system. So that's the VM I use for ethical hacking and penetration testing. So I'm going to show you how to exploit some of the web application vulnerabilities. So today we'll see around 5 techniques, right? These are very basic. These are good places to start. We look at Sql injection, sensitive data exposure, broken access control, improper input validation, and one brute force attack. I hope I am successful with these, because sometimes machines tend to behave erratically. So I'm opening my web browser. Now I told you that my juice shop is running on a different machine. So I'm going to find out what the IP address of that machine is. ifconfig is the command that you know to find out the IP address. So it's 10.0.2.8. And I know it's running on port 3000. So I go into my Kali Linux box and I type in, I already did this, so it's there. So 10.0.2.8, I use a colon. Not sure if you can see this. So it's a colon and 3000. So this is the actual request. So that brings up the juice shop on my Kali Linux box. So this is how a typical client-server interaction takes place. So your web servers are typically running on a different machine. They might use the standard ports for HTTP or HTTPS, or they might use a custom. So I'm in here. It's the same interface. Now let's register an account. Let's go through how this kind of works. So now before that, what I would like to do is show you what's called Burp Suit. So Burp Suit is a tool that's used by ethical hackers who want to manipulate HTTP requests, so requests to web applications. So the community edition is free. So I'm starting my instance. I'll show you how this works. Okay. So you have interface for Burp Suit in my screen. What Burp Suit does is it acts as a proxy. If you haven't heard of the term, you might have used VPN when you play games, right? So it acts as a proxy. It intercepts the traffic from your desktop to the server, right? And it duplicates that traffic and it makes it look like it's coming from the proxy. So Burp Suit uses its own proxy kind of to intercept our traffic to the juice shop. Okay, so that's when we can actually modify HTTP requests and we can try to hack all the websites. It has an embedded browser in it, so that is useful instead of setting up my own proxy within the Firefox browser I have on my Kali Linux box. So let me launch the browser that's embedded within Burp Suit. So this is a newer feature. Previously, we had to set up the proxy, and there were a few steps before you could work on Burp Suit, but they have an inbuilt browser that acts as a proxy. So it's when you access anything within this browser, so it is intercepted by Burp Suit. Let us access the juice shop from within the Burp Suit. Ignore this, usually happens. Okay. So when I accessed the juice shop from within the Burp Suit browser, you can see it tracks all the requests. Okay. So within HTTP, if you can learn to understand the protocol, there are two main types of requests. One is a GET request. The second is a POST request. Okay, so the GET request is when you typically get something from the web server. And a POST request is when you post your username, password, or any type of information for the web server to store. Okay. So the details I'm just overlooking. If you want to learn more, you can learn it. But that's where we try to hack things, right? So we look at the requests, any HTTP request, when you access a website, okay, any HTTP request will look like this. So it'll have a get or post method, and it'll have what host you're accessing, port number, user agent is what type of browser you use. And typically you'll have encoding and cookies. I've talked to you briefly about cookies. Cookies are used to kind of store information about you so that the web server can remember who you are when you access different portions of a website, or if you come back at a later time, they'll know you've already logged in. So cookies is how a website typically tracks you. And there are, depending on different types of requests, you'll have different information flowing. Okay, so right now I have the web home home page open. Okay, so if what do I do to purchase something? Okay, so all these things will get tracked within my Burp Suit proxy. Okay, so one thing you got to do is, if you want to see just the website that you want to hack, is right click and say add scope. Otherwise, it's going to track all third-party cookies and, for example, Cloudflare over here. We don't want all of those things. Okay. So let's log in. Okay. Let's see if it remembers my email. Okay. So I'm going to register. Okay. So this looks good, right? So it was asking you for a strong password. So it's asking you for a security question. Okay. And register. Okay. So I know I'm able to add things to my basket here. So I can say add basket, it shows up. Okay, so I can go in and check out this order, add new address. So this is how we typically design an e-commerce website. I'm thinking Kishore is already working on something like this. Okay, so you can just putting in some stuff. Okay, so it has validation checks to a certain extent. Okay, select an address, continue. So it's not going to deliver me anything, but just, I can go and you can, look at wallet balances and payment options, everything else. So this looks really good from, a sophistication perspective. Now let's look at vulnerabilities. So whatever I've done, so that's all getting tracked, right? If you look at it, look at Burp Suit. So looking at the raw packet, I put in my address, right? So if you track to the post request that I put in, you can see, all the JSON formatted text. And if you look at other post requests, you'll see whatever answers I give to the website, it's in the form of a post request. Okay, so look at my basket over here. So it says, ID, basket ID, everything else. So making use of Burp Suit, let's hack our web application. Sql Injection. So access admin account. So let's go through the challenge. So if you want to look at all the challenges, there is a hidden web page for you. I think it's called Scoreboard. So, there are different capture the flag challenges you can go through, So we are going to solve some of these. I will give you an introduction. When you have time, you can go to the juice shop that's on the web. You can also try the same things. You can install Burp Suit on your laptop. There are YouTube tutorials that go through all the challenges, okay? So if you can go through these challenges and learn how to secure a web application, that would be really, that looks good on a resume. That'll, put you up against your competition when you go to your job. So let's do SQL injection. So going back to my home page. So I think I've logged into my test account. Let me log out. Okay, we are on a home page. Let's use SQL injection to access the admin's account. Okay. Now you have a login and password prompt over here. Okay. So typically, if you put a non-existing application or non-existing username and password, what will happen? Okay, it says invalid email or password, which is good. It doesn't allow you if you don't exist on the website. Now, how do we get into the admin account? So one of the things you can notice here is, one of the reviews will have the admin account. Okay, so this one is over here. So this is the admin account. So admin@juice-sh.op. Okay, so this is the admin account we're going to get into. Let's go into login. And I'm going to put in a SQL command. Okay. So I'm going to put in some random password. Okay, it's giving me an error, but it's like an unexpected error. So when hackers see kind of these errors, they'll know they're onto something, right? So you must be able to handle errors in a gracious manner. If you should be able to kind of give an abstract information without giving an actual error like this, right? So you must just say invalid username and password or something, that kind of masks what the actual error is. Because if an attacker is going to see what the error is, then it's a problem. So in Burp Suit, so how does this look like? Trying to get okay. So if you can see my screen, so I put in the post request, okay? So I put in a SQL query, I put in a random password. So this is the response I got from the website. So it shows SQLite error, detail error. So it's also showing me the command that's being gotten. So I know I can manipulate this command, okay? So that's why you should not give detailed errors to end user. So it's trying to look at some kind of password, even though I did not give it anything. So what if I comment out this entire field? So what it will give me? So let's see. So this commenting is done by double hyphen. Boom, it let me in. So I have admin@juiceshop.com. So I have access to the admin account. So why did this happen? So incidentally, when I put in, let me see where it did refresh. So when I put in the double hyphen, it commented out the password aspect. Okay. So 1 equals to 1, right? So what I'm telling it is, get me this username, or, in this case, it's blank, or 1 equals to 1. What that makes is it makes a true statement. Usually when you have your SQL queries, you will, you have certain things like, select star from username, if user is what the user provides, and the password is what I give, then select that user and bring it to me. Now, if I comment out the password field, and what it will do is it'll make the SQL query true if I say 1 equal to 1. So it will not check the password field because it's commented out. And because 1 equal to 1 is true, it will give me back the username results or the user fields that's needed. In this case, the first user incidentally is the admin. Okay. So that's why I was able to quickly get the admin account credentials. Okay. Any questions? So this is what I told you about, right? Also select star from users where email equals something and password equals something. So that's how you have your query designed. An attacker will be able to comment out this field. If you directly include those variables in a query, an attacker can comment out those fields, certain fields, and he can make other statements true, like using like 1 equal to 1, and he might be able to get a copy even of the entire database. So this is an example of a very, very simple SQL injection attack. So a good way of overcoming these type of vulnerabilities is to use what's called parameterized SQL queries. You want to read more, you go to the web, but I'm just telling you an overall brief. So if you use a parameterized SQL query, you will declare all the variables prior, and you won't directly pass them into a SQL command. So you will put them into a function and you will sanitize them, and only then you'll make use of the queries. So if you directly include variables within your SQL commands like this one, an attacker might be able to exploit it. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So I'm on my admin account right now, which is really good, right? So I have admin has his own basket apparently, right? So this is good. We have the admin account. So admin account usually has high privileges, and there are certain things that only admin can do. When websites are hacked, hackers will typically look for what the admin account is. So they might brute force certain account, certain credentials. So you must be able to detect, multiple attempts for admin, or you must be able to put in controls that only certain IP addresses can access the admin account. So those are done on the network end. So if you have an admin account on your website, you must be really careful about how you authenticate it. Okay. So let's log out. So this, I showed you an example of this. So this is complete. So sensitive data exposures, accessing a confidential document. Okay, so I'm not logged into any account. So if you look at the side menu, the company has, an about us thing. Okay. So this is usually the case, right? So you have websites about companies, they have an about us page, right? So there is this terms and conditions. Okay. So all of this is maybe a document, right? So you must have stored, certain documents on a website, PDFs, sometimes users may want to check out certain documents. So you have to make sure the directory in which these documents are secure. So let's see otherwise what will happen. So as I was doing these things, so, okay. So when I went to the, terms and conditions, so if you look at the bottom left hand of my screen, as I hover over it, you'll see it's accessing a certain, 10 to a 3000 FTP legal.md. So this is how the request looked like. So this is the path. So HTTP request and stuff like that. So this is what's called a subdirectory, right? So you might have the home page and you'll have different directories underneath. That's why you see different, slashes. So let's see what happens if we remove this legal MD. So what I can do with my Burp Suit tool is I can send it to right click and send it to what's called a repeater. Okay, so this is where we can actually modify our HTTP requests. Okay, so what happens if I get rid of this portion, legal.md? Okay. Okay, so HTTP 200 means it's giving me a response, which is good. Let me scroll down. Scrolling down. Okay, so it looks like I have some text. Okay, so files, good files. So there is acquisitions.md, coupons. So there is a legal.md document that we accessed previously. So this is interesting, right? So there appears to be no control over this directory. It looks like anybody can access the FTP directory. So let's see what acquisitions. Okay, copy, putting it in here. Let's send. Okay, I have access to a confidential document. So, okay, confidential, do not distribute, acquisition plans. Okay. So this is what happens if you don't put in controls on your subdirectories within your website. So there should be a separate portions for confidential documents. You must have access control between different trust levels on your web page. So if there is a confidential document, only authorized people must be able to access the document. You must be able to, either re-authenticate them or implement controls within your operating system. I showed you like Windows, you can put in, who has access to which folders. So the sensitive documents should be handled in a separate way. And general users, they should have access only to certain realm of your web pages. So this is how typically even hackers get through, right? So if you don't implement controls and you have some security important sensitive documents, a hacker might be able to browse through all your directories. The Burp Suit is a very small tool. If you go to advanced persistent threats, they have excellent tools to kind of brute force through an entire website and look for all these confidential documents. Okay, so we have a sensitive document. I think we solved our second challenge as well. Okay. So third one, broken access control, manipulate basket. Okay. So let me log into my account that I set up. So I already had one item in my basket. Okay. So even if you don't want to go too advanced into Burp Suit, you have the ability to look at developer tools. This is where you will typically see what's going on behind your browser, right? What goes on back end. So you have, the request itself, the elements on the web page, and what it's rendered in the, in the form of HTML. Have the console, you have the ability to look at the different JavaScripts that are hosted. And if you relaunch it again, I'll be able to get a network flow of how things loaded. So these tools are really important for when you develop website. You might frequently use the inbuilt browsers, developer tools. That the first step, right, to kind of figure out what's wrong with what you developed. So this is also used by hackers. So where was I? So I'm looking at storage, and I told you about cookies. It stores information about you. Now let's go look at one specific thing. So there is an interesting thing. So it's called BID. So I'm assuming it's basket ID. So if you spend too much time on your website trying to hack things, you'll know what each variable is eventually. So if you look at it, it matches, right? So it has 1.99, and I already chose a delivery method. So I have an address. So it looks like it has a basket ID value of 6. So this is interesting, because what if I change this, right? So BID value 1. So I'm trying to say, okay, the admin user is the first user. So maybe he has a basket ID value of 1. So let's change this, reload the web page. It's loading. Now, sometimes web applications break. Okay, so here we are. So I'm able to get into the basket of my admin user. So if you looked at my admin logon previously, you might have seen that the admin has these things in his basket. So I was able to get into the admin's basket. So improper access control again, right? So it's not validating whether a normal user can access another person's basket. Simply by altering the basket ID, I was able to get into another person's basket. So we were able to solve this challenge as well. Again, these are really simple challenges. When you learn more and more, you will be able to solve complex challenges even. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Improper input validation, get cache payback. Okay. So I'm in my test account, I think. Yep. So let's go to the home page. Let's see if we can get some cash back, right? So it's slower than usual. Okay. So there is one very expensive product here. Let's make sure it's tracking things. So I'm going to set up what's called an intercept. Oh, it's here. So when I set this to on, whatever request I send to the web page is intercepted by Burp Suit, actively. Okay. So I'm trying to add this very expensive item into my basket. So when I turn on intercept, usually, comes up, the request comes up over here. Let's see. Okay. So I have the request that sent that, very expensive melon bike into the web server, right? So I have this request. So now let me see if I can modify the quantity to -1,000, right? So a developer might expect that a user will always, input quantities in positive integers. So what happens if I put a negative integer for quantity, like I order -1,000 bytes, right? I forward that request. So if you hit forward, it'll forward that request. Hopefully that's in my basket. So I'm going to switch off the intercept. Yeah. Okay. This didn't come in. So let's go to our receptor once again. I'm sorry, history once again. Let me find the request. Okay, let me send this to the repeater. So intercepting is one way, and you can also repeat things. Okay, invalid basket ID. Okay, does some kind of error control. So let's see. Okay, success. So I put in 6 because I know my account had the basket ID 6. So once I did that, I was successful. So let's look at our basket once again. Still not happening. I think the cookies are corrupted. So because I changed the cookies in here, let's read this. Okay. Okay, so I put in -1,000 items. So look at the price, it comes out to negative, right? So I can, potentially get cash back. I think this takes time to load, but you got it, right? So I was able to put in a negative element and potentially get the negative cash, oh, here it is. So negative usually means you get a cash back. So this is how I was able to hack or exploit improper validation, right? To put in negative quantity and get cash back. Any questions so far? Okay. So let me go into the last challenge. Before that, we log out. Oh, here it is. Pay negative 2 million, 3 million closely. For some reason, it's again really slow. So let me close this one out, right? Before going to a last challenge. Looking at, see if any errors, yeah. Okay, I'll allow this to recover. So one more topic I want to talk about is, where do you typically start, right? So OWASP is a good one. And once you have good control of web application hacking, there's what's called bug bounty programs, right? So bug bounty programs are typically offered by companies like real good companies, popular companies, to have you hack their websites, right? Typically, it's not a production website. It's they will give you the rules of engagement, okay, and you'll be able to test out their websites. And if you potentially find out vulnerabilities, you can report those vulnerabilities to those companies, and you might be able to get paid. There are, for different types of vulnerabilities or weaknesses you find, different types of payments will be offered. So one website is called bugcrowd.com. So if you explore this website, you will be able to, bug bounty list. Okay, so here it is. So if you see different companies are offering, different types of abilities to you to, hack their websites. So if you click on any of the links, you will be redirected to usually their bug bounty website, and what are the rules of engagement? How do you find a vulnerability or a weakness within our website? Okay, how to claim the bounty, right? So if you report a bounty, and depending on the difficulty level or the exploitability level, if it's very easily exploitable, a very visible weakness, they might pay you more. It's a very relatively difficult exploit. Then depending on the context, you might be getting paid differently. Sometimes you just get bug bounty points for the types of vulnerabilities you can report, and that also helps. You have your profile in here. You'll say how many stars you have, what level you are. So if you are going down the track of being a cybersecurity researcher, doing bug bounties is a good way of promoting yourself as an expert in ethical hacking. So you can go through these things, and different companies have different rules. What's important is also a safe harbor, right? A safe harbor essentially says, if you manage to hack my website, but you should not take it down at any cost. Don't take down a protection website. So within the rules of engagement, you'll typically have what can you do, which websites can you try your penetration testing it or ethical hacking. And if it has a safe harbor program, typically even if you hack the website, or you will be protected against laws. Sometimes hackers, what they do is they will, in good intentions, they will hack a website, they will report, this is your weakness, this is how I did it. But what ends up is they go to jail, because the companies will treat it as breaking the rules of engagement, or you did something you should not do. So safe harbor is if you do a good faith security research, they will typically honor that commitment. They will say, okay, you did it in good faith, you did not do anything bad. So look for bug bounties that offer the safe harbor. In that way, you're protected from law. Otherwise, if it's in a gray area, they might prosecute you. So before going to a last challenge, let's see if everything is okay. Yeah, everything is hung. Let me restart. I'm trying to access the website on my local machine to see if it's having performance issues. Looks like it. Break this. Restart my Docker engine. Getting into my Kali machine. Burp Suit.
Happiness. Histia. Mother.
Okay. So opening the browser. So next challenge is to brute force into resetting another user's password. Okay. So let's do this. I'm going into my homepage. I'm looking to see if Burp Suit is tracking everything. Good. Okay. So one of the user accounts is this guy. Jim at Juice Shop. Okay. So let's see if we can reset his password. So, okay. So let me see, forgot password. Okay. It's asking the question, right? Your eldest sibling's middle name. Let me put in a random password. I don't know the sibling's eldest sibling's middle name, so I'm just typing something. Okay. Password do not match. So it says wrong answer to security question. So obviously we wouldn't know another user's, eldest sibling's middle name. So let's see how that looked like in Burp. So this is what I put in, right? So I put the email. So the answer to the question, I didn't know, I just put a random name. So this is what I used for the new password. So this is the response it gave me, wrong answer to security question. So let's see if we can brute force the eldest sibling's middle name, right? So I'm going to send it to what's called intruder. Okay, so intruder is a section where you can brute force things. Now, assuming it's an American name. So I have a list of commonly used middle names, popular names, or even not just middle names, popular American names. So I retrieve 100 of them, just for the lack of time. But if you look at attackers, brute force list, they're like in the millions, right? They have the patience and the resources to brute force millions of passwords, millions of usernames. So you must have some kind of brute force control in your website. So if there is like more than 3 attempts, lock that page or something like that. So going into brute force, so this is my payload, the list of all the usernames. I can paste this. Paste. So I can define additional rules, or I can leave it as such. On the right-hand side, I have a start attack. And I did that. Okay, community version, free version, time throttled. You can see it starts brute forcing all the middle names. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I skipped one section. Discard. I have to define a position, right? So I have to define where to put in that answer. So I have the target, I have the position. So a position is usually a variable. So it's defined between these dollar signs. I'm clearing existing variables. So this is what I want to brute force. So before setting up the payload and brute forcing, I have to tell it to which field should I brute force. So that field should be the variable. Okay. So I put in that and say add dollars. So if you look at it, only the answer, the eldest sibling middle name field is a variable. So this is the variable it will try to brute force. So now I can go to payload and start the attack. So it looks like it's brute forcing all the names. So the status is the HTTP error code. Okay. So now if you keep scrolling down, if you look at Samuel, you can see there's a different HTTP response. So this is 200. 200 usually means, okay, you have a valid response. So I'm clicking on it. So for this request, the attack actually succeeded. So for post request, reset password, Jim. So the eldest sibling's middle name is Samuel. Now, when I send this request, I got a 200. So that means I was able to successfully reset Jim's password if I had the eldest sibling's middle name as Samuel. Okay. So now that this is completed, if I go and try to log into his account, so remember, I have the password as 123456. So let's do a copy. And I'm sorry. Password 123456. Remember, we did not know what Jim's password was. We made use of this attack to reset the password to 123456. So I hit login. So I'm in. So I'm in Jim's web page. So this is also successfully, brute forcing. It's an example of brute forcing a reset password or a password of another user. Any questions? So I hope you understood this. If not, there are YouTube tutorials for the OWASP Juice Shop. Please make an attempt. If you're interested in cybersecurity and if you're interested in security research, so this is where you start off with. Start off with learning web application attacks, master them, and then you go into bug bounty, bug programs. You test yourself for organizations. Then you become a renowned person in the security crowd. Then you get invites to conferences and everything else. So any questions? Okay. So we solved about 5 challenges today. So thank you for joining. We'll meet you in the next class.